Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, we're live. I don't know if the intro had sound today, so if it didn't, apologies for that. I don't know what happened. I didn't change any of the settings, but we'll look into that. So let me know in the chat if you could hear the intro. This might not have been turned on my end. But anyways, technical difficulties. Live now with Dan Infalt and Ashley Covert. How's everybody doing tonight? What's that?
Hey.
I
said Lou's going to have your rear end.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, everybody was saying it had sound, so I might not have had the monitoring turned on. So that's good. All right. Thanks, Rob Nauer. Appreciate that. So anyways, back to the topic at hand. Today we're going to talk about game planning for the opener because it's getting to be almost July. Everyone's probably wrapped up with their their spring scouting, starting to get into summer scouting. And speaking of summer scouting, I was out over the weekend doing some summer scouting of my own, and we'll share what I found here if this works. So I ran into a pretty nice bachelor group and one nice mule deer. It's been hard to turn up some good mule deer this year. The numbers are way down across the West. Dan, I sent you an article I read about Wyoming where they're having a heck of a time too, from drought, winter, CWD. It's kind of a perfect storm of things. So, and I ran into these two. So I think I ended up seeing 17 bull elk over the weekend. So that was pretty good. And that's in my unit. Dan was trying to come hunt with me, but it's a couple point draw for non-residents. So we'll have to get you some points, Dan. So Ashley, how about you? What's going on in your neck of the woods? I think you're on mute. Maybe. Can't hear you. Try to rejoin. We'll switch to Dan. Dan, what's going on with you?
Not much. I've been, scouting hard, working hard. Been sick the last 3 days. One thing that's going on with me is I went to Madison last Friday, and while I was there, I drove by a car lot and they had this little Sebring, Chrysler Sebring convertible in the parking lot. And I don't know, on a whim, I had a bunch of cash in the car. I went in and bought it. Paid $6,000 cash or $5,000 cash. Drove it home and parked it, waiting for insurance. And today I took it for the first drive. I took Carol to eat, and Dan just started smoking. It must be burning, and it kept stalling every time I came to a stop sign. So I'm worried.
Oh, geez.
I don't even have 100 miles on it.
That's not good.
So now I'm going to call the dealer up and see what the deal is.
Yeah, hopefully you got a 90-day warranty or money back or something on that.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't just go buy cars on a whim. I didn't really look at it that close. But it was just one of those moves. You drove by and walked in and just paid for it.
Nash, I think we can hear you now. So what's going on with you?
Can you hear me for sure?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sweet. Okay. So we mostly scout during turkey season. And are you just asking what's going on, or are we already on that part? I'm confused.
Yeah, what's going on with you lately, and what are you doing for your summer scouting?
Okay.
To get ready for the year. Yeah.
So we've just been pool timing it. I've become a full-time pool hag. That's where we're at. But we scout turkey season. That's our main scouting, and then for spring, and then after that, August is about when we start scouting again. And when we do put trail cams up, that's when we put the few we do put up. We're primarily public, and in West Virginia, things get stolen a lot. So we haven't had too many trail cams going up and out anymore. It's been mostly just based off of historical data and then like watching the parts that we've hunted over the years. So like early season, there's certain areas that we know that there are typically deer at, and then mid-season we kind of have an idea of where they migrate to, and then later season it's kind of that. But we do like 2 or 3 trail cameras just to try and see, and we'll try and hang them real high and move them out just for a little bit. But we're kind of over having all of our stuff stolen, so it's not as often anymore.
Understandable. That's an unfortunate part of leaving stuff out in the public woods. Sometimes it grows legs.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, we had 2 episodes about Iowa, the trail camera, public land ban, and a lot of opinions on both sides of that issue. So I want to share something that just came out here. So this is from iowadnr.gov, so the official site DNR releases, and this is from 6/24, which is yesterday. If you scroll down here, trail camera use. So I'll read it. It says it's probably hard to read especially on a phone. It says the Iowa Department of Natural Resources has tabled its proposed policy position regarding trail cameras on public land to allow for more public input on the issue during its wildlife rules meeting held across the state in February. There are no changes in bold. There are no changes to how trail cameras can be used on public land during the 2024-2025 season. So let's get your take on that.
Yeah, I think the DNR is kind of regretting what they said without public input. Regardless of what they think or even what the public thinks, they should have public input. The people should be deciding these things, unless it's making a major negative impact. But if it did, the people would decide not to have that major negative impact. So I really think it should be up to the people. And I'm sure they got a lot of complaints and they're having second thoughts about their decisions. I'm not necessarily for the trail cameras or against them, but I know a lot of people who are probably regretting this. But really, you kind of got to let the citizens of Illinois that hunt the land decide whether or not they want cameras or they want to put up with cameras. So I'm glad to see that they are putting it back into the hunters' hands for them to decide, and then I'd be good with it how it goes.
Yeah, I agree. So just wanted to bring that news since it was a pretty highly viewed episode, the original one where we had the guys from Exodus on, where we talked about that there was the ban, and then we talked to Scott Buckley about how his tactics were going to change, and it sounds like maybe they're not going to have to change until next year because that's been tabled. So just wanted to make everyone aware that watches the show regularly. If you're headed to Iowa this year, trail cameras are still okay for this season. So figured we'd cover that. And then Dan, you sent me an article earlier in the week that I wanted to
maybe we
share.
can get
Sorry, what was that, Dan? You were cutting out a little bit.
I was going to say maybe we can get Aaron Warbritton's opinion on that too, because he said he wants to be on next week.
Yeah. So spoiler alert, if you're a regular show viewer, next week Aaron from the Hunting Public is scheduled to be on. So should be a good episode. And yeah, we could talk about his thoughts on what he was thinking of the ban and if he's in favor or against it going forward. So Dan, you sent me an article earlier in the week, just as a text, friendly thing, and it cracked me up. So I want to just share this real quick. So the title is "Women's Legs Mysteriously Go Numb During Hike. She Thought It Was a Bite, but Here's What Really Happened." The opening quote of the article is, "She was unable to feel the skin on her legs and could not continue her hike," authorities said. And let's see, let me get to the meat and potatoes down here. It says about 1.7 miles shy of the trailhead, the hiker went to fetch water from the creek when she reportedly got bitten by what she thought was a spider, reads the statement Afterwards, she was unable to feel the skin on her legs and could not continue her hike down. She still managed to call for a rescue and relay her coordinates. Then her phone battery died. A team of responders was assembled and drove up to the Taboose trailhead, said rescue officials. They pushed a wheel litter up for about 1.5 miles, then stashed it when the trail became too rough to continue with the litter for the last quarter mile. After evaluating the hiker's conditions, the rescuers walked her down a tricky part of the trail with ropes to ensure safety per authorities. They brought her down to the wheeled litter, and both the hiker and responders arrived at the trailhead close to midnight. And then if you go down, it says, according to rescue, the hiker was not bitten by a spider, but was accidentally stung by stinging nettles on a part of the trail that is only meant for vehicles. So later in the article, it says when the human skin comes into contact with the leaf or stem, it often rapidly develops reddish patches accompanied by itching and burning. Frequently, a prolonged tingling sensation may persist on the affected skin for more than 12 hours. So, yeah, I got a good laugh out of that when you sent that to me, Dan.
If I called 911 every time I got into stinging nettles, I'd call about 3 times a week.
Yeah. So, anyways, we thought we'd open on a lighter note, but today we're going to talk about preparation for the opener, what Dan is doing now, some of your tips to ensure that the opener is successful. So I thought a good topic to start out was the old reminder that loose lips sink ships, and that's me right after I shared some elk pictures. So maybe I should listen to my own advice. But Dan, give me your thoughts on that.
On loose lips sink ships?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you gotta know when to keep your mouth shut. I mean, a lot of guys they're really excited about what they see or what they're into, and maybe they want a little bit of input. I think in a lot of cases they already know how to handle what they've found, but they need that little pat on the back. You got to get past that. You got to be able to keep that stuff in your shirt pocket because people talk. People won't even mean harm, and they'll tell their buddy, hey, he's on a really big buck over in, Spider Ridge or whatever, where stinging nettles get you. And people will end up going over there. Even your best buddies. I mean, I'm really careful about who I invite in to help me take a buck out. Because no doubt, if they're not real good friends and you don't really trust them, they'll end up in there hunting and be like, well, it's public land, man. And, even me, I mean, people think I'm pretty open. I am. I'm really open about the stuff that I do. But there's obviously always a few bucks I'm onto that I'm not talking about. And for good reason. Even if I described them or showed a picture of them, and you might think you're totally fine. You show a picture of that buck. But if you got a picture of a buck on a trail camera on public land, I can guarantee you people in our realm are on that same public land, and they're getting pictures of that same buck, and they know where you're at just by those pictures. So you got to be really careful about who you share stuff with.
Yeah, obviously tougher for someone like you that's putting a lot of stuff out publicly and on video and in near real time quite often. So that's just a hazard of doing what you do, I think. And I know you've accepted and embraced that for the greater good of all public land hunters out there, but that's tough for sure. Well, let's talk about, Dan, your spring scouting and how that's going to transition into what you're doing during the summer. So obviously everyone knows spring scouting that's your bread and butter. That's when you're putting in most of your field work. But now that we're getting into, the heat of the summer, end of June, all through July, what are you doing right now? And how are you comparing that to what you saw in the spring or maybe past seasons?
Well, this last weekend, I went out spring/summer scouting with Eric. Still trying to hit a few spots that we wanted to see. And we literally walked about 3 miles to an island and found nothing. The island was a dud. And then we made our way to a point that looked good, which was literally 3 miles from any parking access, and we're surprised to find 2 set up trees right in the prime spots with cut limbs. And so we really literally found nothing in that walk. But it's getting to the point now where it's very, very hard to determine, like actually look at beds, determine bedding. You have to kind of rely on terrain. And it is turning into time to start glassing. We did a little glassing. I saw an albino doe. Haven't really seen a buck that I'd like to target. But there's plenty of time yet. But right now it's about when the glassing starts. If you're going to use trail cameras, I'd probably start dropping them. It's that time of year, and I'm also making a game plan right now about going through my Spartan Forge app, looking at all the points where I'm hunting, and laying them out in notebooks and organizing them, and making a plan for this fall.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And I'm also putting all my equipment out.
And that's a good point about getting organized, because now is the time to be doing it, right? Presumably you've wrapped up the bulk of your scouting. You've got your old spots, probably some new spots. And I like to look at mine and evaluate which wins I can hunt those on, how many sits, when I'd like to sit them, or when they've been productive historically, kind of get all that stuff loosely arranged. Obviously, in-season scouting, what the deer are doing, what the weather's doing that day, that's all going to influence. So, I mean, Dan, I know you've talked about this before, but opening day, you don't know what you're doing typically until a day or two before, but you might have it narrowed down to a few spots, and then the weather or those conditions are going to dictate. Is that correct?
The most hilarious thing I ever hear, and I hear it so often, is months before season, whether it's gun season or bow season, I'll have people come up to me and go, "I got this great spot for opening day. I'm going to be there opening day," and it's like, you know what the wind's going to be doing? You know what this is going to be happening? You ain't going to see something better. That is a foolish statement. I never know where I'm going to be till a day or two before. I mean, there's places I'm leaning towards. Like, that'd be a good spot for opening day. Doesn't mean I'll be there.
Right.
It's really about having a network of places to go based on timing, terrain, weather conditions, all kinds of stuff.
And then let's talk about glassing, because obviously I was out glassing over the weekend. Out west, that's something I use a lot. That's my primary summer scouting. I don't do much in the woods, but obviously the west is conducive to glassing. There's lots of open spaces, and it works well. And that's the way I cover most of the ground. So what are you doing for glassing? Let's throw shining in there too, because I know you do that. So when are you looking to glass? What types of areas? Maybe what do you do when you can't glass an area, and when do you shine and why?
So shining, I do my best at, but it's hard for me because I go to work at 2 a.m. I'm so tired in the evening. But I do know that when I shine during the night, I locate way more big bucks than just glassing. Around here, these bucks are real shy of walking in fields in view of roads. Glassing, I do find some glassing, more in the obscure kind of hidden areas. From the main roads on main public lands, I have a hard time getting trophy bucks to walk into fields. I do find that there's certain days that it's better. I'll be like just for instance, a few days ago, there was a huge storm front coming in. And me and my son were driving around, and we just saw deer in every field, and older deer. And I said, we got to just abandon what we're doing, get home, get the glasses, and go out. And we did, but then the storm hit. But there's certain days that it's a good day to glass, and I think storm fronts are really good during the summer. Really this time of the year, if you know where there's bean fields are really good just before dark. But keep in mind, good front days are really good. And deer spook. I mean, they spook from shining, they spook from glassing. Keeping your distance can be a good idea. I mean, these deer don't get to be 6 or 7 years old by staying put when people are staring at them. A lot of my glassing that's been productive, I wouldn't say it's the majority of my glassing, but my most productive glassing has been from trees from a safe distance. Get into a tree and watch an area. And a lot of times when I'm scouting in the spring, I'm picking areas like, oh yeah, if they do exit through here, they're going to go through this opening. And if I'm thinking that's an early season spot, I might sit that opening. Now, obviously, you're not going to find that everywhere. But even in swamps and thick woods and stuff, you will find spots where there's like, low swamp or something they're going to cross where you're going to be able to see them cross from a certain tree. And you want to pick something where they're never going to wind you, never going to know you're there. You're looking from a distance with good optics. But you're way better off the roads, back in there, where those deer feel safe during the summer of walking in daylight. And they move really, really well at this time of the year. In July and August are the best times. They will move an hour before dark, even the mature bucks, really well, if they're in a spot where they don't normally see people, or if they're in an unpressured area where people aren't perceived as much a threat. So really getting some tree time now, about now is a good idea. And really, if you can, getting pictures or video is a good idea too, because I'll tell you what, your eyes will fool you. You'll think something's bigger than it is. The velvet will make it look bigger. But if you get a picture, you get video, and you can take still frames, you can turn it, you can look at it. You can start to say, I don't really think that's as big as I thought. I mean, I've literally gone out and glassed deer and thinking I'm looking at 170-inch animal, and you get back and it's 120-inch. It's just the way it laid out with these big black antlers that are fluffed up with the velvet, which might sound funny, but it's true. But if you can get an image of that, you can really kind of lock in on it. Those are my best points for glassing.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people that follow you like to film too, and if you have the time and the capability to get some photos or some video footage, that makes for a great story too. And you're putting your video together if you're lucky enough to harvest that animal. What about water sources? So one of the things, Joe Elsinger, Joe Ree on the Beast, one of the things I remember reading an article of his, I think it was on Meat Eater or Wired to Hunt a long time ago. Maybe it was on the forum. I don't know. I read most of the stuff he wrote, but he talked about early season, especially when it was hot. Joe hunted some hill country in Iowa, that he would focus on like elk hunting on northern slopes, or he would focus on areas next to creeks or food sources where it'd be a little cooler, and maybe run some of his cameras in there. Have you ever experienced anything like that, or what do you think of those ideas?
Yeah, they definitely hang by water when it's really hot. I mean, it's no different than them hanging near a food source. And what they need, they're going to hang by. Now, deer can get by without much water. They get a lot of their liquids out of the plants they eat. But there's a threshold when it starts to get to a certain temperature or a certain aridness. Like if you go down to, and you know this, you go down to Arizona or one of those places, how the water holes are so important. And how, in some places it's not even thought of as fair to hunt by the water. Or out by you, the antelope water holes.
Sure.
It's because it's so arid, they have to have water beyond what they eat. So water becomes important when it's real hot out. I think everybody that's watching this that knows me has watched the infamous video of me shooting the 14-pointer on the water hole. It was 85 degrees. That's why I sat there. It's the only reason I sat there. Everybody else went home crying about how hot it was early on a hunting trip for a weekend. They left before it was even Saturday because it was 85 degrees. No deer will move in the heat. I just felt like they're going to move where they're going to move, but you just got to adjust your hunting style. You can't always hunt trails or always hunt food sources or always hunt this. You have to be, flexible. So water's always got to be in the equation, but I don't know if it has to be the most important part of the equation. What I do, I have to get too far off the topic, but it's kind of on topic. What I do is at this time of the year, I make a notebook. You mind if I talk about that now, or do you have that in the plan?
No, go ahead.
So I got a notebook, and I'm just starting it now for this year. And what I'll do is I'll go through my Spartan Forge app, and I will list I'll name all the hunting spots that I want to hunt. At least the main ones, because I got hundreds, right? But the main ones I want to hunt. And I'll break them down into categories. They might even hit several lists. So I'll have my September early season spots, and I'll have them in order of what I think priority, for whatever reason, priority of what I want to hunt first, right? And then I'll break them down to what winds I can hunt them on. Then I'll break them down to what weather conditions. So say I go out and it's a rainy day. I'll look at my notebook. I'll look at what my priority is. Then I'll look at what I got written down for windy days. And there might be a spot that I can only hunt when it's real windy. That'll be in that windy list. So if it's windy, I might prioritize going to that spot because I can't hunt there if it's not windy, right? Because you got to have the movement of the trees to get in there. So I'll have everything broken down into wind, weather, time of the year, and target bucks. So if there's a certain buck that I want to hunt, I might have all of his in one list. So I'll have several lists that I can go through. If I start seeing a certain buck on a regular basis that I was hunting last year, I might start focusing on all his beds, his bedding areas. And then I want to use a list of just that. So I'll have several lists broken down into one notebook.
No, that's good tips there, because I think it's easy, like you said, to go into the season with a pre-planned idea of what you're going to do, or like people say, oh, I got a great spot picked out for opening day. But especially as a public land hunter, I feel like it's important not to put all your eggs in one basket, because those deer get killed or poached, or people move in. Like you said, you and Eric were out, you find trees already set up on points maybe you had planned to hunt. So all of these things as a public land hunter can occur, and it's good to have multiple irons in the fire, I think, at all times. What about acorns, Dan? I know that's a big part of your strategy in the swamps, especially those isolated oak islands. How do you find out when or if a tree is producing mass on a given year? Are you physically walking out there? Do you have trail cameras out there? Do you have some sort of history or weather idea that lets you know there's going to be acorns?
Some oak trees, it's really hard to see them without binoculars. You really got to look close. But me and Eric were checking on that this weekend when we were out scouting. We did find the ridge we were looking at, where all the sign was, is an oak ridge in a swamp where there's no other oaks, but it's got heavy oaks in it. So we stopped and we checked the oaks, and the red oaks were just loaded. Right now, they're just loaded. So we know that's going to be a draw this fall. And based on the sign there, I know I want to hunt in that vicinity. So the white oaks, I will start seeing on the roads and stuff when they start dropping. You know what I mean? I will check on them. I'll walk out and check on them, and you'll hear about it. Everybody's going to be chattering about what the acorns are doing. And basically, what we usually get here, I mean, last year was different. It was spotty by me. It was kind of half and half. But usually it's either full-blown oaks or they're scarce, one or the other. But I will be checking on it. With the spotty oaks last year, I'm expecting a good crop this year, but I don't know. It changes year to year. A couple of good storms can change that too. It can blow all the acorns off the trees, or, you know.
Sure. Yeah, I know you've mentioned a lot of times by your opener, a lot of the whites, especially on a spotty year, those are about gone, right?
Yeah. They it always amazes me how you can go to like big woods, hill country, and there's acorns on the ground, and in late October, and it's like they don't even eat them all. Here they eat them up pretty quick, but the oaks are isolated. There's like big groves of oaks, but they attract deer from a long ways because there's not, the deer are living in swamps where there's no acorns. And then when you got an island of like say 10 acres of solid oaks, every deer might be traveling to that. They might be eating there at night, kind of like a food plot, but that's where they're headed. And that's good knowledge to have, because if you know where the bedding is, you can cut it off. A lot of times these deer will bed close to that food source, but the mature bucks tend to bed at the safest spots close to those food sources. And if there's pressure at that food source, even further back. And I've seen deer go over a mile, or, well beyond a mile, to an oak island or an oak ridge or a point through cattails. So knowing where the bedding is and cutting them off is important, but not expecting them to be right there. You're going to see lots of deer if you hunt acorns or close to them, but you still have to hunt the mature deer where they're coming from.
Yeah, and without giving too much away, some people that I know, Beast members, were hunting an area in Michigan that's pretty heavily pressured, and they the one guy got a nice buck. Oh, I don't know what, if it wasn't the opener, it was the first couple of days. So somewhere between October 1st and October 3rd, when you'd expect deer, still to be fairly near the crops. And this guy got this deer several miles from the food source. So I think with all the people out scouting and running cameras and stuff, the pressure even that early can, like you said, they're going to look for that secure area, and it can push them off the food source pretty easily and pretty far.
When by the time opening day comes, every Oak Island around here is going to be walked 25 times by guys. There's going to be cameras put all over them and everything else. Those bucks are onto that.
Yeah.
Now the thing is though, with early season, is if you look at the bucks I've killed, beast methods shine in early season. That's when you get the best patterns. It's not the best. Best patterns are probably in late season, in winter when it gets really bitter cold. But it gets really hard to kill them at that time frame too. But early season, those deer still move kind of on that summer pattern. They move real well in that first week or two. And literally, if you ask me when is the best time to get a good buck, if I just wanted to kill a good buck and I want to make sure I got one, when is the best time? I'd say rut, just like anybody would. But if you ask me, I want to shoot a world record buck, when is the best time? I'd say, early September, where you can hunt in September, because those deer are still in a summer pattern. And if you look at what I've killed, I obviously have my best luck, and I mean that luck, during rut. I see a lot of bucks, a lot of 2 and 3 year olds that are really nice bucks. But when I'm shooting those 6 and 7 year old deer, it's the first week or two of season. But you do not see the numbers of deer. And you still have to have some knowledge of where those deer are. That's where all the scouting comes in handy. You still got to get in the right spots. It's not easy. But when you do succeed, it's generally a bigger and older age class buck than what you're shooting in rut. Especially in that's more so on public land than it is on private. In private land, it might go a little the opposite. But on public land, those deer do not get to be 6 or 7 years old by running around in rut chasing does. I mean, I can't walk through the woods for 5 minutes without walking under a tree stand. So neither can one of those bucks.
Yeah, I think out west too, that's super important for me because the deer density on average is lower, right? So, and if you've got a bachelor group, and I tell my friends this, it's like you might have 5 mule deer bucks in there. Well, if you've got a 1 mile or 1 deer per square mile, buck density, and you got 5 deer in a group, that's 5 miles worth of bucks. So if you don't have a good idea where they're at before the season starts, good luck. It's easy to waste a lot of time out here in non-productive, like deerless areas. But on the contrary, if you have done some good scouting and you know where they're at, you can have some really good hunts, right off the bat. And like you said, I killed my second best bow buck early September on a upper 80-degree day for that reason. And then, it must have been 2 years ago, 2022. My buddy and my father-in-law were out, and they were they were not very excited about the conditions because the opening day in 2022 was literally 101 degrees. And my buddy shot a mule deer 2 hours before dark, and 2 days later, the father-in-law on a 90-degree day shot a whitetail buck. So just because it's warm doesn't mean, like you said, those early season patterns. But that's early September openers. That's a lot different than October. So I think all things to keep in mind.
Another thing is that what people don't consider too much is like if you plan your vacations around rut, is like here where I'm at, the main parking lot will have 25 cars in it on a Saturday during rut. Opening weekend on a Saturday, it might have 4 cars or 5 cars. You're way more likely to run into people, and people that are gung-ho to kill deer in that rut. If you don't have your scouting homework done and you're really like, I just don't have enough homework done, I'm really going to rely on rut a little bit, I would consider not hunting rut, but hunting the week before rut, when they're still patternable, not just running around crazy. Because if you got skill, that is a really good time of the year to hunt. They're going to lay down sign and they're going to repeat themselves on that sign. So that's a better time frame to hunt than during the rut when you get lucky. because everybody takes that rut weekend. And then the weekend before, like the last week of October, has less people. I do that all the time. Like when I went to Iowa, I purposely took the week before November, the last week of October, because everybody said the first 2 weeks of November, because I knew there'd be a lot less pressure. And I didn't run into much pressure during October at all. And I ran into really big bucks. I did not end up tagging out in that week, though, and had to go back for the first week of November.
You were close, though.
Breathe. Yeah, it was close.
Yeah.
But when I went back, the number of hunters was 10 times what it was the week before. And that's a more important virtue than peak rut. And really, literally, peak rut is a great time to get lucky. Be in the right funnel at the right time. But you don't know if there's a guy down the funnel from you, one way or the other. You don't know what deer is going to come by. They're just flying around chasing does. You don't know exactly where they're going to come. Sometimes they come running by you too fast to shoot. But that week before, they're on patterns. And virtually, there's a lot less people in that week because they're paying their dues to hunt the next week. They all want to crowd out there at the same time. Hey, more power to you. I'm going to go the week before.
Yeah, like you said, a little more skill involved and a little more predictability also. Yeah. I was in Iowa in 2021 and same thing. I went to, I don't know, must have been 22nd or 23rd and saw some nice bucks and hardly any people. The people I did see was mostly resident plates. And then I went back around Halloween and that's, everybody and their brother out of state, myself included. I'm not pointing fingers here. I was one of those people too, but definitely filled up. So one more thing I want to talk about, or maybe one or two more things, Dan, but what about tracks in the summer? Specifically, I'd like to know like cornfields and stuff, or maybe those hard to access areas where you're talking about setting an observation stand, or maybe a trail far enough away from the bedding area where you think there might be a survivor buck from last year. What can tracks tell you this time of year, and how do you balance that with getting too close and setting up a place?
Well, tracks can tell you a little bit, but even tracks and sightings can be a little bit misleading. Even a picture can be misleading. And the reason I say that is because there is going to be a certain percentage of those deer, maybe as much as 20 or 30%, that relocate in the fall. You know what I mean? That move their whole. I think GPS studies have shown that 1 out of every 3 deer has multiple home ranges. And usually summer's one of them and fall's another. So those deer that you see all summer that disappear in the fall, that's probably the reason. But the majority do stay there. So you can't put all your eggs in one basket because you've seen a buck or whatever. But as far as the tracks go, I'm looking for tracks of a mature buck. And I'm trying to learn those tracks to see if when I see other big tracks, it's the same buck. Take a picture of them. Put your hand next to it. Take a clear image picture. There's going to be certain differences to the shapes, and there's going to be certain distances to the marks. If you can find a clear track to take a picture of, do it. The front hooves are what you're looking at. There's a back hooves and the front hooves. The front hooves are the big ones. And what I'm looking for with a front hoof is a couple of things. You want to be able to lay 4 fingers in it, right? And that's not necessarily because it's spread out, because especially a running track can spread on a small deer. A 2-year-old can look pretty big if it's track spread. But one thing you'll notice is on a mature buck, the width of one toe will be really wide. It won't be thin. It'll be wide. And then on the front hooves, they never have the pointy, sharp tips. They're always rounded on the front, like they're worn round. If it's from pond to dirt or whatever, as they get older, they get more rounded tips on those front toes, and the length of it. Shorter ones are usually younger bucks, but you can be fooled by that too. The biggest buck I ever shot had a real small front hoof. I mean, it was almost amazing when I saw it. But like I said, don't put all your eggs in that basket. But if I start seeing multiple sets of tracks from different deer in that size range, I'm definitely locking in on that area. But if I'm on a target buck from the year before and I have a general idea of what his track looks like, lot of the times they're similar enough that you're not 100% sure, but you're like, I'm pretty sure it's in the same areas, same feeding areas it was last year. The same buck is still alive. Because that's a big part of it. You don't know for sure with most of these bucks if they survived. If they didn't get shot after gun season or during gun season, if they didn't get shot late season, if they didn't get hit by a car, if EHD didn't get them or whatever, you never really know unless you confirm they're still alive. So a lot of my summer and fall is spent trying to confirm whether certain deer are alive.
Yeah, I think for me, the tracks, two things. It's one, if you don't have a lot of cameras or you don't like to run cameras, that's a good way to just check out some areas and see if there's a mature buck in the area. Maybe you don't know what the headgear looks like, and Dan, you made a good point too. And I'm going to bring Joe Elsinger up again because he had a real good post on the forum back in the day about he'd shot up obviously a lot of mature bucks, and he was real diligent about keeping track of the tracks. And, he had some very large rack bucks with just like a normal looking track. But a big track almost always was a big buck, right? At least body wise, it was a mature buck. It's pretty rare to see
especially if it's a wow track. I mean, some deer that are really old have just a wow track.
Right.
I mean, it takes a lot for a deer to get to be 6 or 7. And by the time they do, that foot is usually pretty recognizable.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to mention on tracks from hunting different areas like Michigan, the track size from Michigan where I hunted, which was like kind of central northern. So the deer on average they're younger for one, and they're a little bit smaller compared to the deer in southern Michigan. But I was surprised, watching your videos and stuff, talking about 3 and 4 finger tracks. I had seen 1 or 2 that I was like, oh, that's got to be a good buck. But the first time I went to Kansas, I was walking some of the ag fields there, and I was like, oh, this is what Dan's talking about, right? Because different class of deer, different age. Obviously, they got a lot more age, or they did then in Kansas, and the deer in general are just a little bit bigger, better, whether it's better nutrition or milder winter, different genetic. I don't know what it is, but they're heavier bodied on average. So when I saw those, it was big. And then coming to Montana, mule deer, even the mature ones, they kind of have a little smaller track. So something I've picked up is like the relative track size for the area. If you look at 100 tracks, focus on the 2 or 3 biggest ones. That's the big deer in the area, and that's what a big track looks like for that area. So that's something I would bring up to people, especially if they're traveling or they're just starting to look at tracks.
Well, you kind of got to look at impact too, and how, when they're walking, a one track is sinking so much more than the rest. One track is, impacting that soil more. What is the stride of the track? How far apart are they, when they're walking versus running? There's a lot of things to look at. When you look at a mature buck, they got a wide chest and a small rear end in comparison. So their back feet step inside of their front hooves. When you look at a doe, a mature doe, her rear end is noticeably bigger than her front end. So her rear track steps slightly to the outside of the front hooves. So you can kind of determine buck, doe. You can, tracks are never 100% though. It's not like seeing a deer and knowing he's there. I've always said, like, I get eyes on them, they're dead. Because then I got that total, complete confidence. So what I really want to do is, those things give me a hint. The tracks give me a hint. They give me a clue. The rubs give me a clue. The things like that start making me zero in on an area. But I still want to see a target and lock that into my mind. Because once I see it, I have that confidence, I got that belief, and now I believe I can kill it.
Yeah, and Dan, I'm sure we talked about woodsmanship a lot with Scott Buckley, but I bring up the tracks because people are running cameras. I mean, people are out there glassing, but you talk about it all the time. Stand on your back, scout your way in. Those are maybe sometimes the differences between getting on that buck and not as, oh, you noticed, I've got this buck on camera or I've shined it in this area, but I didn't think maybe he was in this certain area, and then you catch a glimpse of a big track, and that could be a good clue also.
Yeah, you think back of all the bucks I've killed, and you think about the little things that made them happen. It's just one day, one thing that might not even happen if some events could have easily changed. Like one day, somebody having loose lips show me a picture of a giant buck that had its rack cut off. I'm like, man, look at that. I got a picture of the buck. and I don't get his antlers. And I'm looking at that thing. I'm like, that is a slop mature buck. And I knew where he had gotten the picture, and I knew he wasn't die hard. He wasn't getting to the back of the property. So I went back there. I located the buck, and I ended up killing it. And, just seeing that one picture put me on that buck. There's times when one time when I got the biggest buck I ever got, I couldn't sleep, so I got up and went shining. If I wouldn't have went shining, I wouldn't have found that buck. It took me 2 years to kill him once I found him, but it was that shining event that put me in the area that killed that buck. It's what made me look for him. It started that 2-year quest to kill him. My part of my point is that you got to put a lot of time in this, and one day, any day, can be the turning point. It just takes one moment to find one little clue and turn your direction and give you focus. But for me, that real focus, that real turning point is when I see him. When I see that deer, I lock on it, and I know that that's the deer I want to kill. That's what makes me put all my focus into it, and then that thing's going to die.
Yeah, that's it's been said a lot, but it's true. I mean, we're talking about early season, but can be any time of the season. That determination and just any moment can change your season so many times. And I know it's happened to you. It's happened to me when maybe things are looking pretty dark, and then all of a sudden it's the best season of your life. So look at, not to pick on you, Dan, but last year you had a mishap in Iowa and probably thought things were pretty grim. And then a couple of days later, maybe the next day, I don't remember, you dropped that giant in Wisconsin. So things can turn around any day. Well, let's get Ashley back on here. And it looks like we got quite a few questions while we're waiting for Ashley. Oh, there she is already. I was going to say, Dan, let's close out on the last thing, since we're talking about early season. And you touched on some of the things that make September such a great time to kill a mature buck. But maybe give us one or two more tips or things from some of your mature buck hunts that got you those, some of those 5, 6, 7-year-old deer in September.
You got to be aggressive. I think one of the biggest things that people do wrong is they're so scared they're going to scare the buck out of the area that they kind of stage their way in. And if you're hunting 200 yards back, it's like slapping that thing on the ass and saying, I'm coming for you. You have to go in there, and the very first time that deer ever senses the danger is when the arrow's sliding through its chest. You get your scent in there, you do things wrong, and you got to do your scouting, from about now on, from a distance, until season. You gotta move in when it's kill time, and you got to move in aggressively. And it's got to be day one. Most of the big bucks I've killed, very first time I ever sat there, and the next biggest bunch of big bucks I've killed has been like the first time of the year that I've hunted a spot. It's really a matter of getting it right the first time, going for broke.
I agree. That's a good name too, by the way.
Going for broke?
Yeah. That's my channel name. Yeah, you gotta be aggressive.
That wasn't on purpose.
Yeah. Well, consensus is in. You got to be aggressive. And hey, sometimes you mess it up, but if you're going to make good things happen, you can't be scared to mess it up. So anyways, Ashley's back. So looks like we had a ton of questions today. So fire away.
All right. So I'm going to start with the latest ones first. So George Hamrick asked, at what point of the season do you start shifting your game plan for bucks? Focusing more on different food sources, does, or do you just keep hunting the sign regardless?
I hunt bucks 24/7. I never hunt does. I have a hard time. Even when I'm tagged out on bucks, it's really hard for me to go out and just hunt does. It just doesn't seem like a challenge, and I don't like killing things. I do it sometimes, but I kind of got to push myself to do it. Like, I don't have much in the freezer. The kid needs a deer, or the neighbor does, or something, then I'll go out and I'll do it. But for me, it's really about shooting mature deer. And when I take does is when one comes in while I'm buck hunting, and I know my chances are gone anyways. Like, I'm only going to hunt there once. A doe comes in and it's still there at dark, and there's nothing else is showing up. I shoot it. The times I have broken those rules, I've paid for it. I'm sure a few people can remember not too long ago, just a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, at Dave's farm. I sat there after having some pictures of some stuff going on, and I thought, well, I could see the bucks from a distance. I'm going to sit there, and I'm not going to interfere with that area. I can probably shoot a doe here. I'll shoot a doe and watch the area and just see what's going on. And I hadn't seen any real big bucks yet. I shoot the doe, it runs out in the field and dies, and a shooter buck walks in the field. And I'm like, that's a shooter. And it's staring at this dead, where that deer got shot. It's like freaking out. And while I'm looking at it, a monster even bigger comes walking underneath me and looks up at me in the tree. And then I ended up shooting it here and losing it. And I'm pretty sure if I would not have shot that doe, that buck would have walked through naturally, would have never looked at me, and I would have just drilled it. That doe cost me. I can remember one hunt where I was with Rat Slayer, and I had a cameraman, and I was having a little fun with it. I had a bunch of doe tags, and we were in a western county full of does. And Rat Slayer was hunting one area, I was hunting another. And Rat Slayer had about a 170 class deer go past him at about 40 yards, and he couldn't shoot that far.
Yeah.
And it was headed straight for me. And about the time he had that pass by, I shot a doe. I never seen the buck. So I just, you only get so many chances in a year. You've got to really focus on bucks. You got to always be focused on them from day one to the last day, to the last minute. I mean, there's bucks I've shot on opening day, and there's an 11 pointer I shot one year when it was 20 below and monster wind chills, and they were giving warnings to not even go outside. And it was the last day of the season, and I shot it at closing time. You got to be out there full out to the end, because you only got so much time to hunt, and you only get so many chances. I mean, I might go through a season and get 2 chances, 1 chance. If I didn't go out that day, I didn't get that chance. It's really about how much time you put in and how much time you put in quality spots.
Right. Alrighty. So another question is, how do you try to pattern deer when everyone around you is baiting? Is it a big problem in the north? It sure throws the deer patterns off.
It can have a huge impact on your hunting, for sure. But I find that if there's still mature deer around and there's lots of people baiting, there's a lot of those deer that are onto that. And they're kind of staying away from the bait or not going in until at night. But really being leery, checking to see if the people are there. And if you can hunt the dead zones where they're not baiting, you can still get on those deer. There was one hunt where I went to the UP way back in the 90s with some guys at work. Back then you could buy 2 tags in Michigan, and they were $75 a tag.
Yeah.
And I shot a Pope and Young buck the first day just by looking at where these guys had their bait piles. I went to where they weren't hunting and found a swamp edge and a point, and I shot a real nice buck. And those guys were hooting and hollering. They've been hunting there for like 12 years. They'd never seen a buck that big on the property. And they were like, oh my God, that's amazing that you got this on the first day you hunted here. And they were a little bit ticked too, because they really wanted to show how I couldn't do what I do down here up there. Well, day 2, when I shot an even bigger buck, they literally kicked me off the property. They were mad. They wouldn't even talk to me after that. 2 days in a row, I shot two Pope and Young bucks in the UP back in the 90s on one property in Houghton County.
That's wild.
And I mean, both of them were right around 125. They don't get much bigger than that when they're mature up there, I don't think. But it goes to show you can hunt them around baiters. Everybody up there was a bait pile. And it still is. I go up there and hunt in late season. It's just like bait piles everywhere. Where you see a stand, there's a bait pile. And I don't hunt the bait. I just get around and I find where the deer are. Some of the deer are still going to the bait. Some of them are sneaking in. Some of them are checking to see that the hunter's there. And some of those guys on bait piles still kill big bucks. But there's going to be a percentage of those deer that know what bait is, that got to be 5 years old by taking a couple broadheads, or maybe even getting winged by a bullet and surviving. and they are not going to walk into those bait piles. Those deer are going to be back in those swamps. They're going to be away from the hunters. They're going to be avoiding that human scent. And those are the ones you can kill because they're going to be in those areas where people can't carry a 200-pound sack of corn. They ain't going to walk that far.
Right.
Makes it a little easier, really, because it blocks off all the areas you don't have to hunt. Pressure kind of makes it easier for a beast-style hunter, as long as there's still big bucks there to hunt. If they kill everything, well, that's a different story.
Right. So, Sure Guy wants to know if you have killed any CWD positive deer in the 2000s.
I wouldn't know. I never test any. I just eat them.
I mean, that's a very valid answer. That's how we are here too. Trout and morels or morels, I don't know. But he says, Dan, have you been shooting your bow, and how does Rat Slayer like his new bow?
Rat Slayer loves his new bow, but we're just getting it back. I took it over to Steve Pagels to get set up. I have not been shooting my bows because I've been waiting for my new ones, which just arrived. I just got 2 matching new prime bows, which I haven't even unboxed yet. I just got to put sights on them, and I believe they're set up for me already. Want to make sure they're shooting good, and then we'll probably give one away to the members channel and find something charitable to do with the other one. And then I'm about to start shooting. I got to get all my equipment out right now. I got to take my stand apart, wax everything, make sure everything's tight, check the cables. I got to inspect my sticks, inspect all my equipment, get my camera arm tuned up, make sure nothing's squeaking. I'm going to have to go through everything, but the bow's coming out pretty quick here. I'm going to start getting shot. The plan was to do that last weekend, but I got sick. Got some sort of stomach flu. I just laid around.
Real quick, while we're talking about members, I'll shout out the members on today's live. So Aiden, Minnesota, Tim Heath, Zeke Outdoors, Tim Crane, Justin Tanner. I always see Justin Tanner in there hyping up the crowd with the thumbs up. So thanks, Justin. Public Land Menace, Steve Swartz, Ridge Reaper 762, Andy P, Hunt 1969, Jimmy Gammons, Chris Ott, and America Outdoors. If I missed anyone, that was the list at the time. So Dan, real quick, talk about, because people that aren't a member can't see what you're doing on the members channel. So talk about what you've been doing and what you've kind of content you've been putting up there. And you mentioned maybe a giveaway. Talk about that stuff too, real quick.
Yeah, so far what we've done is we've put up all the DVDs, which is quite the value because the DVDs are, I think they average $25 a piece or something. We put all those up there free. You got to look for them because they're still at the bottom because they're the first things we put on there. And I've been putting up some little short things that really are just filler. But we went out and scouted one member's property. Well, it was public, but we went out and scouted for him in a big wood setting and helped him get on some deer. We filmed all that, put it on there. We've been wanting to map scout somebody's property, get them on the show and talk to them about their property, but we really haven't had any submissions, really. If you got something, email me or text me or something if you're on the members channel. We can talk about doing that. And you don't really have to worry. There's only about 100 people on there, which is kind of cool with the giveaways and stuff because it gives you a lot higher odds. I'll do something like if we give the bow away on there, I'll do something where we write down a number and whoever comes closest to the number we have written on. That way, the people who want to go after the bow can go after it, not necessarily everybody, because not everybody wants one, So somebody who wants it gets it. But I want to do as much as I can with them when I go places like when we do the Michigan show. I'm thinking about putting something out there that if anybody's going to be at the Michigan Mobile Show, maybe we can have a little get together, go scout a property or something with a couple of people from up there that are members. If anybody's from Michigan, reach out to me if you're a member on the members channel and that kind of stuff. I can say that this year everything's gone way down. I mean, we've lost a lot of our sales and stuff, and money's been really tight because of Joe Biden's great economy, and we're hurting pretty bad, really. So we really appreciate the people that are kicking in a little bit for the members channel and help and support us. And it, occasionally we got to do some things with sponsors to get a little money in, and it's hard because I won't take people I don't like or products I don't like. And it keeps a little bit more of that off the channel by being self-supported. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, real quick before we move on, Ashley, anybody that's interested, I looked up the dates. So that Mobile Hunter Expo is the show Dan's talking about. That's going to be July 26th, 27th, and 28th in Kalamazoo. If you go to the mobilehuntersexpo.com, you can get more information, ticket sales. That's Chris Leopard's deal. We had Chris on early on in the show.
I'll be there all weekend. I'll be speaking there, and you can come meet me. Just walk right up, have a conversation. If I'm talking to somebody, just wait. I'll make sure I talk to everybody that comes.
We gotta feed them raccoons too. We need the support to feed the raccoons.
Right. Right. I was a little late coming home from work today, and they're all sitting up by the porch looking for me. They're looking in the windows and stuff, and
I just want to
mad.
come hang out so I can hang out with the raccoons. Like, no offense, Dan. Like, hanging out with you is cool and all, but like, I really want to hang out with the raccoons. They're adorable.
That's what we should do with one of the members. We should have them come out and like go fishing for a day or something, and then end the day over here feeding raccoons and shooting shit.
See, yeah, there you go. We've got an idea. So this Steve Denoyer, he asked, how do you keep track of all of the spots from year to year and when to go to them? I know marking on Spartan Forge, but you must have hundreds. Is that part of what your book is, like that you keep for yourself, or is that something else?
That's a really good question, and most of it's up here. And what's funny is I can remember spots real well. Carol always gets pissed at me. She's like, you can remember where a deer pooped in 1984, but you can't remember my birthday. You can't remember. You can't remember that we got plans tonight. You can't remember this. You can't remember that. And it's like I got to have focus. You only got so much brain. So the little bit of brain I have, my brain's squirrel size, but because I got a squirrel size brain, I have to just put the hunting information in there, and unfortunately, the rest falls out. But if something's important to me, I'm going to remember it. But with that said, the last few years when I didn't journal things real well, I got through the season and looked through my notes and thought, damn it, I never hunted this particular spot. And it was something I was really looking forward to. So you do forget. So the notebook is really the best way, because if you're going through there looking at the spots and really focusing on which spots are the best at the top, and looking at this, not necessarily the best, but the most important to you, and focusing on that, it's going to keep you in tune on where you got to be. And that's why I got different categories too. Like I got categories for wind days, categories for this, categories for that. Maybe on acorn years, they're going to be in these spots particularly. So I have different lists, and some of them have the same spots in, and then I'm only hunting one spot once or there. And a lot of times during the season, I'm abandoning all of that and going off a sign, because sign trumps any past knowledge. Any scouting I did in spring or whatever, I walk into bleeding trees coming out of a bedding area. I'm not walking past it and going to a tree on a point that I scouted in spring, no matter how good it is, or I'm an idiot. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've hunted with where you're walking and they don't even focus on it. They're like, holy crap, there's a good one coming through here. We should hunt this one day. Well, what about today? Right. Oh, we're going over there.
Yeah.
It's like, what? You don't walk past good sign. You don't get your scent there and leave.
Right.
The other thing, real quick, I would say, especially now with the apps, Spartan Forge, they got a good journaling feature. A lot of apps you can tag a photo to your waypoints now. So if you're technology oriented at all, that stuff's great. And generally, people these days always have their phone with them while they're hunting. It's so easy. After a hunt or on your way in, oh, there's a new scrape that I didn't see last week. There's a new rub. Or after the hunt, what you saw. I've been a lot more diligent about taking those notes. And when you look back 12 months later, you got a lot more accurate memory than you might have otherwise. So I use those apps quite a bit for that.
I'll tell you what, it was a huge gameplay or game changer when those apps like Onyx and Spartan Forge came out, because when you can mark a spot on a map, an exact spot, and when you zoom out, it'll take you, you zoom out far enough, it'll take you to the exact spot. That is a huge, huge game changer. Because when I started this, finding those spots and drawing little maps and notebooks and stuff and marking things, I would be off a lot, and I'd ruin a lot of spots by walking past or something and not getting to where I thought I was going, when you're going off memory from spring or whatever.
Sure.
But with those apps, and you can take a picture of the tree like you were just saying, that has been huge. Just huge. Almost to the point of unfair. I almost feel guilty about it, but you can't go backwards on that now.
How much more time we got, Jeremy?
No, go ahead. We got 10, 15 minutes anyways. 10 for sure.
Alrighty. So Alonzo asked, and I'm not sure how this one's going to go over. Have you tried walnuts for cover scent?
Yeah, I don't believe in cover scent. I use Dan scent. I usually stink so bad that I can't stand myself.
I remember
it's all wind in thermals. What were you saying, Ash?
When you were on the challenge with the Hunt in Public, and they were talking about how long it took before you brushed your teeth. that one sent me. That's why I said I don't know how well this is going to go over.
I can remember on the Hunt in Public, they had a big following that came to them from the show they were on before they went to the Hunt in Public, which was Midwest Outdoors or whatever. And Midwest Outdoors was more mainstream hunting. So the people that followed them from mainstream hunting had mainstream values. And when I was on that first hunt we did in Minnesota,
yeah,
I can remember I thought, oh, I'm going to really screw with these guys. So I'm like, yeah, well, we're here. We're going in this spot. I got to spray down now. And I get out Deep Woods Off. And I'm like, and I got so much hate mail for that. They're like, you don't really do that. We know you don't do that. You can't be putting that on her. And it's like, nah, I really do that. And yeah, I was being funny and I was like poking at you, but that's really what I do every time I go out hunting in early season. If you don't, you're gonna be like this the whole time.
Yeah.
And even with I love the what do you call that thing that you put the little cartridge in there and it gets rid of the mosquitoes?
Thermocell.
But Thermocell. I love that, but still got an order. It's this huge thing I got to carry with me. And if it's windy, the thing don't work. I mean, it works in a calm day and it works in the wind, but not to the point where it gets rid of all the mosquitoes. And I can't have a mosquito on the side of my face stinging me in a nerve when there's a deer coming in. I just can't, So I just spray down. And really, it's all about controlling that wind. I mean, the reason I'm like this isn't because I'm stupid or isn't because I believe I can beat a deer's nose. It's because I really believe you can't beat a deer's nose. And the evidence proves that. It's all over everything. I mean, you look at any scientific evidence, there's no way to beat a deer's nose. Dogs have proven that. Studies have proven that. Every study that proves that scent control products can fool a deer's nose are studies that are biased and put on by scent control companies. Every time somebody does it independently, they show no difference of whether you use scent control or you don't. Those deer get downwind, they smell you, they know exactly where you are. Doesn't matter how strong the scent is, they can smell it and they locate you. In my journals, I used to keep track of how many deer winded me, how many deer I seen, how many crossed my scent trail, their reactions, how many when they're downwind smelled me. And I had a guy who had a journal just like mine who was a scent control nut. I mean, he would only hunt if he had time to take a full shower, bacon soda himself down, you get dressed in the field into a full scent lock suit. And he was madder than hell when we compared notes. And he actually got busted more of the deer than I did. And I think the reason was probably because he took more chances because he believed in his suit. But he got busted more than I did per deer. And I stink. I go straight from work. I take my uniform off, my sweaty uniform on, put a T-shirt and jeans on, and climb up a tree. Sometimes I'm still wearing my work boots. And I'm killing plenty of big bucks.
That cutting oil and metal chips brings him right in, Dan.
Maybe that's the cover. Maybe that works better than the walnuts.
Yeah.
Maybe. Listen, we tried walnuts one year, and my clothes smelled like they were moldy, and I will never do it again. I will, because Justin's super scent control, and I just float. But we tried walnuts, and it made everything smell like mold. So I personally don't recommend it anyways.
Me and Eric had a conversation when we were 5 miles back in the swamp on Saturday, and like completely out of breath and realizing that we got to wade back to the truck. And I said, wouldn't it be cool if we could just, I think I filmed this too, but I don't know if we'll make a video because we didn't find any place to hunt. But I said, what if we could just buy a drone? We could come out here with like 1,000 pounds of corn and drop it out here in the middle of the swamp. And then, go back, get our tree stand, drop it in the tree. And maybe the drone could pull us out there and there'd be no scent trail, nothing.
Wouldn't that be nice? Get your hand.
We could be like the modern day hunter, right?
Yeah.
The drone could go put cell cams all around it for us. maybe we don't even have to go out there. We can just mount a gun to the drone, and then the drone can have a hoist to go down and pick up the deer and carry it back to the truck.
I'm sure at some point we can have dummies like shoot the bow for us, like those crash.
Well, that's what I got Ricky for. Just kidding. I like Ricky.
Stick him to the drone. It's fine. I
just like picking on him. Ricky's gonna get mad at me for saying.
You better be nice to the Undertaker. He'll be next on the list.
Yeah, he's gonna outdo me in Nebraska this year. He's already talking crap. That's why I got to talk crap about him. He's like, I'm gonna kill the biggest buck in Nebraska. I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna get that buck that was after last year. Okay, all right.
Hopefully, that was a nice buck.
Yeah. He already called dibs on that property.
Yeah, that's usually how that stuff goes.
Is that a thing? Can you really dibs it? Is that?
Actually, he can't because we met a local down there who suggested that property. So I told him he has to talk to the local first and make sure that person isn't hunting there.
Oh, yep. Okay, fair. All right. So another question was from Tim Crane. And he said, have you looked on Dave's farm to see what the new owners are doing, or are you kind of trying to stay away from it?
Well, it's kind of weird. I was going to, and the Dave's sister, when she sold it, said that the new guy wanted to meet me and asked if he could have my information. I gave her my information to give him, or give her permission to give him my information. I never heard from him. And I went past her one day and noticed that the property where the guy that bought the house in the middle, that turned out to be a real jag, and was trespassing all over the property and annoying the hell out of me. And I had to call the sheriff on him like 3 times. I noticed that he had a beaten trail with his ATV straight to the guy's I don't know, he put up a little shack where he's standing while he's building his house. So he befriended the guy really well, and I just didn't want to deal with it because that guy was a jag. And not to mention, that guy's building a house right in the middle of the farm. I mean, it's only 70 acres.
Yeah, it's going to ruin a lot. That's kind of what happened to our private property.
Yeah, and it was honestly the year after he died, I had a really hard time going out there and hunting. I got a little used to it in the end there, but when I first went back, and I think I'd kind of have that now too, especially with the new house going up and seeing that right where I hunted and stuff, and I'd just rather just stay away. I'm fine on the public land.
That's completely understandable. So somebody else, completely different tone. Aaron Melotti, sorry if I butchered your name. Thoughts on the CJ Alexander buck and the 23 indicted charges?
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I know the first when it first came up, I know there was some pretty bogus stuff they were claiming about him, that it was like I didn't see any evidence to see that he was guilty. But now they're claiming they have more evidence, and looks like Ashley just fell off a cliff.
Bye, Ashley.
I didn't want to play no more. Ooh.
Hopefully, Ashley's safe. She climbed back up the ropes to the top of the cliff. But
Yeah, well, it's a good thing you weren't in a tree stand.
yeah, it looks like he's probably guilty. I really don't care. I don't really care what he did, what poachers do, or if he poached or he didn't. If he did, it's sad, but whatever. I mean, we just had one of the members, he's probably watching right now, stop at the house, brought some fish over for me, which is really cool. I appreciate that. Me and the rats there are going to eat them up later. But he was telling me that he manages a local quarry out here that has just a bunch of monster bucks on it. That's all private and they don't allow hunting. And they caught something like, I don't remember if he said 16 or 18 people poaching on the land last year.
Jeez.
I mean, it's insane. The amount of poaching is incredible. I mean, I would say that when you go to like a deer show and you look at all the deer heads up there, I wouldn't doubt it if 25% of them are poached in one way or another. Some rule was broken. I wouldn't doubt it at all. I think there's a lot more of that going on, and But the good part is that's the one good thing about cameras is people can't get away with as much now because of trail cameras and stealth cameras. And
That is a good point. Yeah, that is a good point.
That's the one great thing about those cameras is they catch people. I mean, I wouldn't dare go on somebody's property, go across the border on purpose because there's cameras everywhere watching. And I would have to think anybody with any common sense would think the same.
Right. All right.
Not to mention if you're hunting someplace where you shouldn't and you shoot some, giant buck with a bizarre rack, which is what everybody wants, there's going to be pictures of that buck and people are going to know where it lived.
Yeah, prime example, Dan, the deer you shot last year, you said several, maybe 10s or 20s of people sent you pictures or said I was after that buck or I had seen that buck or whatever. You didn't know it existed, but plenty of other people did.
On the land that's next door to the public I was hunting on because the buck never goes on public land.
Right. Yeah. Well, like you said, good thing you film all your hunts.
Right.
Right. All right. So we'll probably get one more question in, and it's from Brian Griggs. It says, Dan, have you found sign this year of a 5-year or older buck?
Yeah, I always find sign of mature bucks. It's kind of hard to tell if the sign is from 5 years or older. But usually from 5 up, they got those real high rubs. I found some of that, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the big thing for me is if they got, rubs at the center of the rub, not just one, but you find multiple rubs like that in a forest that are above your waistline to the center, that there's something out there that's mature. And yeah, I'm onto some stuff like that, yes.
Well, before we wrap up here, Ashley, thanks for taking the questions. Appreciate that. Want to remind everyone, Dan announced we should be good to go. Sounds like it's 99% confirmed that Aaron Warburton from Hunting Public will be on next week, Tuesday, the usual time. So looking forward to that. And then, Dan, after your speech there about the membership, we had several people join. So appreciate that. I want to call them out.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah, quite a few. So I want to call them out real quick. TT 2011-123 is the username. Mike Dameron, Bill Toppler, Trout and Morels, Liam McPherson, Nolan Short, Wisconsin Bowhunter, Steve Denoyer, and Derek Roush. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate the support.
Really appreciate it.
And I think that's going to do it for today. So like I said, next week, 7 o'clock, we'll see everybody then. And Dan, you got anything you want to wrap with before we jump off here today?
Don't be lazy. Get out there, hunt, scout, do whatever you can to make your season better for this fall. Study maps, put some cameras out if you have to, go glassing, go climb some trees, spend some tree time, even though it's summer, and watch some distant field. But do what you have to do. It just takes one outing to locate one deer, and like I said before, when you make that eye contact, that's when you get it. That's when you bond with that deer. That's when you can kill it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we will catch you next week.